The compilation you're about to hear is a series of life-threatening, horrifying, and in-your-face situations in which the author is at risk. This could easily happen, and they are so believable and realistic. With that out of the way, let's begin. Story number 1. Harassed or chased down by a car while walking with my mom. Okay, so for context for this story, I live in a pretty rural area. We live in the outskirts of our town, which already is small compared to the populations of the other towns in California. We are about 15 minutes from the small town and 40 minutes from the main city. We live down a dirt road with some neighbors. Our house has no other fences attached to ours, and on two sides of the house is only fields and dirt roads. One side having a single house in the field. The other two sides have a couple neighbors down other roads, and nobody really interacts out here, except my dad talking to two of them sometimes. I was probably 12 when this happened. I had low self-esteem and I wanted to start exercising more. I had been enrolled in a charter school due to bullying. And yes, that played into my self-esteem, but let's get on with the story. So I didn't really have many ways of exercise besides a treadmill that we owned. I wanted to start getting fresh air too. So my mom thought I was stubborn about it half the time. But we began walking and usually would go in the mid to late afternoon when it would start cooling down outside, but it was still light. In case it got dark, we took our flashlight too. Being out here, it was notorious for stray dogs to sometimes make their way out here. And we would carry pepper spray and a mini bat just in case one got vicious. However, a dog will play into this story. One day, me and my mom decided to go on a walk in the later afternoon. So, me and my mom took off and started walking down the road. When you walk about a quarter of a mile down the road, you start to come towards a little cross-section. There is a road going left to the highway, a road going right to the neighbor's house, or the road goes straight down to a utility road. Me and my mom discussed walking down the utility road to get a good walk in, since it went on for a while. When we started getting to the crossroad, this dog came out of literally nowhere. We were looking at it, and it was in the center of the roads, staring at us. Me and my mom looked at it, and my mom said that she got this feeling in her stomach that we needed to turn around and walk home. So she grabbed my arm and started leading me back home, and then let go so that we could walk. We were in the midst of walking when she looks ahead and stops to stare at something. I ask what she's looking at, and she points. A white car pulled up to our fence and quickly backed up and shut down the road on the side of our house. Mind you, nobody ever goes this road except one old man that we know. Anyone else who does usually is scoping out my dad's tools to steal. My mom said she felt a bit uneasy because of it and pulled me to the edge of the dirt road, almost into the field. The car had driven to the highway and left, or so we thought. We continued walking back to our house when this car comes back and drives down the road we were walking alongside. I caught a glimpse, and it was this smaller white car with black tinted windows that you couldn't see through. My mom instantly got a feeling of impending doom and pulled me into the field. Not too far, but far enough. We kept walking through the field towards our house. Getting closer now, but this car comes back down the road. My mom stops me in my tracks to see what the car is doing, and it drives back to our house and starts driving around it super fast. For context, we have a random road and area that goes around our yard on our property. My mom waits until the car drives back the side road and she tells me that we need to start running. So that's what we did. We started running through the field, getting to one of the little sections near my yard. The car comes back and drives down the road, trying to cut us off. Me and my mom are panicking at this point and have no idea who this is and why they are acting out like this. The car circles around again. My mom drags me further to the right of where we were, I think, and told me that we are going to run down into the ditch. We get down in the ditch and the car comes back around and pulls to the edge of the ditch where we were. The front of the car was facing us, and all I could think about was that if it drove down, it would hit me and my mom and probably kill us. My mom quickly put her arm in front of me and stood dead still, while I was literally horrified and dropped our flashlight and I think my water bottle. The car was getting ready to drive down where we were, and then suddenly they backed up and drove around the yard, going back down the side road to the highway. Me and my mom felt like our souls left, and she tells me to run, don't look back, and get to the front gate. I run up the ditch, feeling my heart pounding. I run around the yard and towards the front gate. Flinging, I opened and I started running towards the front door. I did not hear my mom behind me. I was running to the door to open it right when I looked over and saw the car coming back down the side road. I ran into the house, trying to catch my breath. I saw the car drive down the road and I didn't see my mom, so I was panicking. I ran towards the sliding glass door and suddenly my mom comes running towards it and flings it open, running in and locking it. She tells me to go lock the front door while I try to catch my breath and tell her I was scared because I had no idea where she was. She went to chug some water from the fridge and told me that when I was running, she was trying to shut the front gate when she noticed the car coming back down the road. She said she knew she wouldn't have time to follow me to the door, so she ran behind my sister's car to stay out of view of the car. And when it drove back down the road, she took the opportunity to run the back door since it was closer to my sister's car. It's crazy to think that if we hadn't seen that dog standing there in the road and decided to turn back, that we may have been run down. Fortunately, we haven't seen the car again, and I think it may have just been some crazy person or druggie who just so happened to come down our road that day.
Then what happened? Did they drive off? Did you ever see them again?
They drove off and I never saw them again. I still get freaked out when I see white cars if I'm walking outside my yard.
Oh my. Do you have cameras?
I do not. Unfortunately, anything like that is against our lease, unless we have them sign off on it and give them access. However, we ended up roping off the road around our yard and used cones to hide metal posts inside, along with putting up trespass signs. So if any cars try to drive through now, they are going to take a lot of damage.
What a super creepy experience. This is just horrifying. Thank you for sharing. How was your mom after it?
She's okay. She grew up in towns like ours where there weren't many people and she actually has a lot of crazy experiences. Number 2. My first date in Korea beat my face on the street. First and foremost, I'd like to clarify and start off by saying that I'm writing these lines in the year 2019, in the month of September. I had been sent to Korea from my university a few years ago. They told me for my major I had to go somewhere in Asia, and my friend had really talked up Korea for me. I knew nothing about it, but I decided, what the hell, and I embarked on a semester-long trip. I had only had one serious boyfriend in my life, who I had broken up with a few months prior. I also don't enjoy one-night stands, and wasn't digging the dudes at the clubs in Seoul. But I still wanted to have some sort of romantic experience, I suppose. So my friend recommended I use this dating app to meet English-speaking Koreans. That way I could meet someone and experience the actual dating culture. I thought, I'm young, so why not? I was just so eager to have new experiences. Maybe it sounds dumb to try dating in a foreign country, but it worked out for me eventually. Just not the first date. I met him on a dating app after being in Seoul for about 3 weeks. Let's call him Tim. I still didn't know the culture or city very well, and I was a bit naive about everything. He eagerly wanted to meet for a date after talking to me, and he seemed nice. I should have asked more questions, and I should have noticed that he was not giving me many details about himself. Tim was a guy a bit older than me, but claimed he was a college student. I assumed he had done his military time, all men in Korea have to, and returned to school. We talked for a bit and decided to meet for a tea date near the school I went to. He wanted to come to my dorm originally to pick me up, but I live in an all-women's dorm, and I didn't want him to know exactly where I lived, since we were still strangers. So, instead, I insisted we met at the main town center near the subway. He really didn't like this idea, which looking back was a red flag, but eventually I insisted. The night of the date, I waited for an hour for this guy. He was very late. Tim weirdly claimed he just wanted to make me wait. I thought he was kidding and messaged him a laughing emoji, assuming that he was just lost. When he finally arrived, he was much smaller than I thought, but a man's height has never been something I care about much. He was also quite thin. Maybe I let my guard down because I didn't see him as physically threatening to me, which was a mistake in the end. Right off the bat, he was way too touchy with me, and breathed creepy and heavy. I was so off-put with his demeanor. I'm usually very tolerant with different personality types, but this was very odd to me. I had been told that Korean men would be polite and not so touchy on the first date. He was also dressed oddly like in business attire for a date, but I thought that maybe it's just a Korean thing. Again, I was dumb and I knew jack shit about the culture. Then the first thing he said to me was, "You're not as white as I thought you were." I thought this was a translation error, but his English was near perfect. So I asked for clarification, and he said what he meant. "I thought you would be more white. Your skin is darker than I thought, and your eyes aren't as green. Are you pure European?" Now I was officially weirded out. First of all, I'm pretty much as white as you can get. I'm Irish and Scandinavian, so white as hell, basically. So the fact that he thought I could have possibly been any whiter was funny. And why did he care in the first place anyway? Why does my skin color matter to this guy? And why is he bringing it up? He said about 3 times on the date how he wished I had greener eyes. And every time I would just reply, "Well, Maybe my online photos make me look brighter? And brushed it off as him being nervous and trying to start a conversation. Isn't it funny the dumb excuses you make for people when you're panicked? When we arrive at the tea place, I tried to order a basic raspberry tea. And he stopped me and told me that I had to have this special tea. I thought it was weird. He wanted to choose my tea for me, but in my head I brushed it off once again. He really insisted I drink only this tea type, and I just agreed. These small details become weirder later. After tea, he asked if we could look around my school. It was dark, but the school was very well lit, so I agreed. And the whole time we walked around, he would randomly stop and grab me for long hugs. At first, I let it happen. But then I stopped him, and he just kept trying. He kept grabbing me and breathing hard into my neck. It was so awkward. He also would not tell me any personal details about himself. I asked so many questions, desperately trying to distract from all the awkward grabbing, and to try and get to know him. But he would never tell me anything. He even said at one point, "I'm a mysterious man," like a movie line. He also said something like, "You look so much like my favorite movie character." And I asked who, but he said that I would have to figure it out on my own. Finally, he said, "I want to go to a dark area." And in my head I screamed, "Hell no!" At this point, I wanted the date to be over fast. He somehow knew there was a wooded area behind my campus, and he said that we should go there. I said no, and that I wanted to stay near the main campus and town. But he kept pushing. Finally, he grabbed my arm and started dragging me there. He said, "I can't let anyone see," and I started to panic. I finally ripped my arm away and just demanded we leave and go back to the main road immediately. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't ask for help or get angry. Maybe I was scared. But I just began to book it back to the main road, and he followed. We ended up in front of a hospital near the center of town, and I told him it was time for him to go. I made some excuse and he was pleading with me to stay. I told him we could meet the next day, and I lied, and I would message him. I just wanted to get away at this point. I was pretending it was all okay just so that he would leave. Suddenly, I think he's leaning in to kiss me, and I immediately think, "Oh God, no!" But it was so much worse. Instead, I felt pain in my face. It takes me a second to realize that he was biting my face. It was like a dog. I had never felt the sensation before. He leaned his head sideways and bit me on my nose and cheek, as hard as he could. I screamed and pushed him away from me. His face looked so freaky, and I barely had any time to react in words. Instead, I ran up the sidewalk until I saw a convenience store on the right. I ran to the back of the store and bent down to start crying. The man who owned the store started to yell at me, but I couldn't explain my situation. I just begged him in English to let me stay. I ended up having to buy a popsicle to stick around. God, I wish I had learned some Korean by then. I guess Tim didn't follow me. I peered outside the store and I didn't see him. I texted a friend and I waited for them to get me to take me back to my dorm. On the way, I messaged Tim and basically told him to stay away from me. I told him he was a creep, that he shouldn't bite women, and something along the lines of me calling the police, and then I blocked him. I was so scared to walk around my school area after that. I was so afraid that he would find me somehow. I'm so thankful I never let him pick me up at my dorm. I called my mom to tell her what happened when suddenly she said, "Wait, what did he ask you?" She then put some details together and realized that all these weird things had to do with the 50 Shades of Grey books. At first, I thought she was just being silly and overthinking a bad date. I thought she was joking, but oh God, she was right. She had recently seen the movie or read the book or of something and knew the details. She had recently seen the movie or read the book or something and knew the details. The eye color and the way that he dressed, and the tea he made me drink and the random lines he said. It all matches the books and movies for his dirty little fantasy. My mom thinks he picked me because I look like the girl in that movie to him. He explains why he was so fixated on my appearance and his whole thing with the biting and trying to dominate me. Even if it wasn't his intention, I later learned that there are some few creeps who seek out foreign girls to dominate and have sex with as like a prize. They call it riding the white horse or something along these lines. On a happier note, this bad experience didn't stop me. I eventually met someone else in Korea and we ended up falling in love. We even did the whole long distance thing. And now I'm living in Korea, studying and working, hoping to marry soon. I guess I didn't let bad creepy guys stop my life. As for team, let's not meet. It's been years, but I will kick your ass if I see you. And I won't have to bite.
First of all, what the fuck? Second of all, congrats on finding love.
Oh, thank you. My friend at the dorm pushed me to not give up, so I wouldn't forever have just this one bad experience with Korean dudes. I eventually met someone else and we traveled Korea together and had many dates. When it was time for me to go, we both decided to try long distance even though it sounded insane. It's been a few years now and I couldn't be happier. I've become quite good at Korean and I'm working and living with him in Korea now. We plan to go to the US in the upcoming years, but until then, I've learned to love Korea and function here quite well. I will say, for a Korean man, my fiancé is very open-minded and not as traditional as many Korean guys I've met.
I had a guy desperately trying to get me to go to karaoke with him. When I finally relented, he tried forcing himself all over me. It was gross, but I have to say at least he didn't chomp on my face.
The karaoke or DVD bang are both traps. A lot. I had a friend who went to the DVD bang with a date and suddenly he was all over her. I'm glad my date just wanted tea, although maybe a dark karaoke was his next mission. And for the people wondering, bang in Korean means room. Bang. So it's a place people go to watch DVDs, like a tiny little private theater. But no one goes there to really do that, since Korean teens and young adults can't take their dates home to their family. They often hook up there or at love hotels.
Oh my, that was a terrifying roller coaster ride of a read. I'm so sorry you had to actually endure it. I kept thinking as I was reading, oh no, please get out of there. OP, don't drink the specialty. Don't go to the dark place. And the face biting. Good lord, this guy sounds so creepy and dangerous. I'm glad you never saw him again.
I'm glad he never tried to find me. Even to this day, years later, living in Korea, I worry I'll somehow run into him. Although now I'm prepared to kick some ass.
That guy was freaking disgusting. I read those 50 Shades of Grey books and saw the movie. I mean, the BDSM relationship portrayed in the book is very unhealthy in itself, and your Korean creeper dude was bringing his idea of a BDSM relationship to a whole other level of unhealthy. There was zero consent on your part. Also, there is no part in the book where anyone bites the other's nose and cheek. Just a weak bite on the lip, maybe. This guy seems like he had no experience with actual women. He just went with what was purely in his head and desperately tried making it reality. I'm relieved, Obi, that he didn't do anything further. I'm sorry this happened to you, and I'm glad you found love.
You're spot on. You're spot on. In fact, I'd say I agree with someone who asked this. How did you make it through the books and stay sane? The real masochism is reading them. And more hilarious is this other reply that goes, her inner goddess forced her to.
Dude had him trained to boson one too many times. In all seriousness though, that's pretty terrifying and just so what? Congrats on being strong enough to get back out there and find someone better.
Oh my, I love Train to Busan. And yes, maybe he saw it too much.
On the behalf of Korea man, I apologize for this creep's behavior and I'm glad this one experience didn't make you think we are all like that, which unfortunately tends to happen to any bad experience with a group. Although I'm Korean American, I've heard a lot about guys in Asia fetishizing white women because this stereotype of them being easy, though I've never heard of someone basing their ideal date on 50 Shades. Glad to hear about your love. Wish you both the best.
Oh, your comment is highly appreciated.
I have a Korean friend and he's the perfect gentleman. But he said that Korean schools are really worried because the teacher don't care about bullying, so some kids beats over really badly. He ended up going to my school because of bullying. Were you bleeding when he bit you? I'm quite shocked that the convenience store man didn't at least try to help.
Oh, no, he didn't draw any blood, thank God. And yeah, my fiance tells me about his days in school. How the boys would just beat each other up in schoolyard out of pure boredom. I taught English for a bit to kids and they told me about some of the crazy bullying in schools. I heard that kids even committed suicide over not having fancy clothes, especially North Face. It's so sad. Korea has some of the highest suicide rates in the world, and it's often kids. There are many things I love about the Korean culture, and things I think they do better than the US, my home. But their education system, I believe, is their biggest downfall and injustice to their kids. They stay in school until late at night and fight just to get into a college. Poor kids. My fiance and I agree we wouldn't raise our children in his home Korea, just because of the school system mostly. Korea is an incredibly safe and fun country for the most part. Obviously, my experience with creepy biter is a rare one. And it's sad that the school system is such a disaster.
Yes. In Asia, a lot of the time the adults don't care about bullying and don't try to teach love and kindness so much as success. For instance, in China, some delusional parents say that their kids have a right to cheat because everyone is doing it. The kids probably just do it because if they aren't the best, they get beaten. I am Asian and I love our cultures, but we need to start having a life without abuse. The amount of school and extracurriculars is getting out of hand. Kids aren't allowed to be kids, so they don't develop interpersonal social skills and just fight or become depressed and isolated. We don't need socialization classes. We need recess.
Sounds like this dude was just fucked up regardless of what culture he came from. You are just an object, not a person to him. The fact that he couldn't figure out that 50 Shades is fiction and not an actual guide on how to treat women just shows what a creep fucking idiot he was. Thank goodness you got the hell away from him and actually met someone way more decent. That's great that you are engaged.
I never did like 50 Shades. The relationship portrayed is super abusive and manipulative. It's horrifying to think there are people out there using the book as some type of guide. Though it definitely doesn't help that the author herself has purposely created that image of her book just to make more money off of it. How irresponsible. I just really dislike E.L. James.
I am totally, positively overwhelmed with the replies. Thank you so much. Number 3. Armed men outside my front door. I have been a long-time reader of this subreddit, so it is honestly kind of surreal that I now find myself writing about an experience that I had very recently. I'm writing these lines during the final days of January of the year 2024. I'm from Australia, but I'm living in Ecuador. I live in Ecuador, but I'm not from there. Therefore, I'm perfectly able to speak both my native language and Spanish. It was a Friday night and I had gone to bed early, as I had to work on Saturday morning. After reading in bed for a bit, I drifted off at around 10:30 p.m., only to wake up about an hour later so loud, to loud screams and people yelling profanities. I thought my girlfriend was watching a movie with the volume way up, and I went out into the lounge room to ask her to turn it down a little bit. Instead, the TV was off, and my girlfriend was staring at the front door with her eyes wide. Our apartment is on the ground floor of the building, and so our front door opens directly out into the lobby of the building. The voices in question were coming directly from the lobby. I could not make out specifics. In my defense, I was half asleep, and the language of the country I live in is not my first language. But there was a lot of swearing involved. My first thought was that it was some kind of domestic dispute, but after listening, I realized it was a group of men that sounded extremely aggressive. I look at the WhatsApp group chat for my apartment building, and to my horror, saw a message from one of the people in it that there were armed men in the building, and that we should not leave our flats. The country I live in is experiencing a marked uptick in crime, and I had heard stories of armed groups of men robbing entire apartment blocks. But this had seemed fairly apocryphal to me. However, that was my first thought, that these men would kick down our door and rob us. One of my dogs started to growl at the commotion outside. I shushed him, and thankfully he obeyed. I heard a commotion in the apartment above me, and I went out to my patio to see what was happening. I heard what sounded like a large piece of furniture being knocked over. And women and children screaming in terror. At this point, I had no idea what was going on, but I knew that by now they would have robbed us already, if that is what they had planned to do. My girlfriend and I decided to hide in a small shed at the end of our patio, monitoring the group chat on our phones. Our bigger dog silently stood watch outside the door of the shed. his eyes locked on the sliding door at the end of the patio. I would find my smaller dog later, cowering between the washing machine and the dryer. After 10 extremely tense minutes, I heard the screeching of tires, signaling what I hope was the perpetrators fleeing the scene. Eventually, someone in the group chat said the police had arrived, and breathing a huge sigh of relief, I came out of hiding and opened the front door. Alarmingly, on the floor of the lobby there were zip ties that had been cut, and the security guard was talking to one of the tenants. The man was bleeding from a large gash on his face and looked extremely shaken. Over the next few hours, the story would unfold. The man I saw with the gash on his face was the tenant in the upstairs apartment, the one I had heard the commotion coming from. He was the owner of an import-export business, and for whatever reason had a sizable sum of money in cash hidden in his apartment. Someone had obviously found out about it and planned out the robbery that woke me from my sleep on Friday night. A group of 8 men had followed him into the apartment building's garage and ambushed him as he got out of his car, and judging from the gash on his face, roughed him up a little bit. Some of the group of 8 had gone to the lobby, surprised the security guard, and zip-tied him. The remainder of the group had gone up to the apartment, robbed it, and then fled the scene. It's fairly chilling to think that armed men were mere meters from my front door. So, to the armed men that stormed my apartment building to steal my neighbor's cash, let's not meet.
This is a real horror incident. That event is an absolute horror to experience. Did the police call these criminals? Was the police helpful? May I know which country this happened?
As far as I know, no, they haven't. I'll update in the post if I ever hear anything though. Oh, and by the way, it happened in Ecuador.
I wanted to visit Ecuador as a tourist. Shit.
I really wanted to visit Ecuador as a tourist, but shit.
You should. The chances of things like this happening are very low. Although crime has gone up, there are still lots of safe places.
I know some place in Europe because of crime they have locking bars that are across the doors like a jail and going to the foundation.
Yeah, a lot of places here have this too. Our building didn't have anything like that because the neighborhood we are in is really safe. The building management is upgrading security now though.
Ecuador is a crime fest and unsafe with the drug and gang wars everywhere. It's very hard to live there though.
I would not describe it in those terms personally. I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to live here. It is an amazing country and I really haven't had much to complain about while living here. My experience is that many Ecuadorians are highly resourceful and hardworking people who have overcome huge obstacles in the past. I am very confident that they will succeed in dealing with this new problem that they are facing. I have lived here for 8 years, including through the worst of the pandemic, and this has been the first time I have experienced something like this. Gang wars are not everywhere. The Highlands region where I live has not seen anything like that. The drug trafficking related violence has been primarily located on the coast, and even then I know people living there who have pretty much gone on living as they had before. It is honestly dismaying to hear that Ecuador now has this kind of reputation, because as with similar countries such as Colombia and Mexico, countries that I have visited and enjoyed greatly, this is a simplification that only describes a small part of the reality on the ground.
I'm so glad that you and your girlfriend and your little good puppers are safe. I hope things get better in your country. Stay safe.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. I'm actually not from here, and honestly, it was kind of a shock because it's always been such a safe part of the city. I am hoping it's more of a flash in the pan than a trend toward crime being more widespread. Girlfriend is a bit shaken up, as am I, but dogs are back to their usual antics. I'd like to add again that I'm in Ecuador. I've lived here for 8 years, and I think we'll all be alright. The apartment management is already improving the security of the building. It's just that it hasn't really been important before because this neighborhood is very safe. As in, people are out walking their dogs at 10 p.m. This is despite being near some sketchier areas of Quito. I also have a hunch, and I may very well be totally wrong here, that the guy who was robbed was into something shady. As why else would such a large sum of money not be in a bank? I still feel really sorry for him and his family though. Nobody deserves to go through that.
Ah, that makes sense. Ecuador. Looks like a truly beautiful country.
Number 4. The creepy hotel owner who thought he could. After reading many of the stories in this subreddit, it reminded me that I have one I thought I had forgotten. I'm writing these lines on the very last day of January of the year 2024. I'm a South American woman, but I have been living in the States for about 11 years now. First, I moved to Colorado when I was 21, to the small mountain town of Silverthorne. That's Silverthorne, Silverthorne. Silverthorne. I was recruited by an exchange student program for college students in South America to come to the US, work and travel during summer break in the South. Up to that point, I had never seen snow in my life, so I was extremely excited to be living in a cold, snowy place for once. I was going to be working at a very popular hotel in the town of Frisco, not too far from the hostel I was living in. The hostel itself had its own creepy stories, but I won't talk about them in details at the moment. That will be for later, perhaps. So far, I didn't know exactly what kind of job I would be doing in the hotel. All I knew is that I was supposed to show up there on a certain date and time to talk to the owner, a Ukrainian American guy that was probably in his mid-40s back then. So I show up, introduce myself with the basic English I had at the time, and I tell him I'm excited to start working there. He gives me a weird long stare, almost as if he was analyzing me. He was a tall man with very pronounced eyebrows, so that kind of creeped me out for a second. He then showed me to the restaurant and said I would be working there as hostess, besides delivering room service orders. I really didn't think my English was that good to be in close contact with the public back then. I thought I would be working back of the house or housekeeping, but he insisted. For those who are familiar with the area, this part of Colorado is not too far from Vail, so it's needless to say they get very busy there during ski season, and I was dealing with customers from all over the world. That's when I also started helping out as a server during breakfast. And of course, would get lots of orders wrong by my lack of English, which made the owner very mad. I remember one time that my coworker and friend was taking a little bit longer to wipe down one of the tables when we had guests waiting to be seated. So he grabbed the towel from her hand, yelled at both of us to get out and stop being so damn useless, and then proceeded to throw the towel at her face. Let me just make a small note here to say that this girl was also an immigrant like me, with fantastic English and living in the country for years. But he would always try and find ways to show us how slow, dumb, or inferior we were compared to him, an American citizen. Then at night, after the place had slowed down, he would then act all apologetic and buy us drinks at the bar, make forward comments about my appearance, and even caress my legs. Yep. I was starting to feel uncomfortable around him and would always try to not be in the same room as he was. During working hours, I would be focused on customers or talking to my coworkers, and I would never make eye contact with him if he was present. On New Year's Eve that year, there was a big incident in the hostel I lived at. I was out that night with a few coworkers, but I learned later that one of the residents had gotten way too high on who knows which drug and started chasing down one of my friends, also from South America, inside the hostel, while pointing a gun at him, yelling racist slurs, and making death threats. He got arrested, but it was easy to say that most of the students living there no longer felt safe. While telling about the incident to one of my coworkers the next day, the big boss overheard the conversation and immediately came to check on me and made sure I was okay. I thought he was being nice and thanked him for checking. He said I should not be staying at the hostel anymore given the circumstances and invited me to stay in one of the hotel rooms, free of charge for the next 2 weeks, while I looked for a new place. That seemed very generous of him, especially given the fact that the hotel would be completely booked often, since it was the peak of ski season. I accepted his offer and moved in the next day. I was so overwhelmed with happiness for finally having some privacy. I was sharing a room with 5 other girls in the hostel, and for getting some extra sleep before working my breakfast shift, since I was now literally living at work. Lol. That was until one night later that week, where I felt extremely exhausted after being slammed in the restaurant all day and delivering orders to several rooms. I was ready to get cozy in my hotel room and go to sleep. I was off the next day. I think it was around 2 in the morning when I woke up completely groggy and noticed that my door was open. I could see the lights in the hallway. Then I noticed the silhouette of a tall person standing inside my room and watching me sleep. I couldn't see a face, but could definitely tell it was a man. As I start realizing what was going on, I hear a metal clanking noise, as if he was getting ready to take his belt off. What in the actual fuck, I yelled. What in the actual fuck, I yelled. That person quickly got out of my bedroom. The next day I asked management and co-workers and said there was definitely someone in my room the night before. They said I was probably dreaming or someone from housekeeping must have gotten into the wrong room. Wrong room? At 2 in the morning? Housekeeping? The owner didn't comment on the case and stopped talking to me or even acknowledging my presence after that. To my relief, of course. Nothing else happened. I moved on. I got a new job, a new apartment to live in, etc. About a year after my little incident, while checking the local Submit Daily News, who do I see on the front page? Him, the owner. He had been arrested the night before after getting 2 female hotel guests way too drunk at the bar and letting himself into their rooms once they had crashed for the night. They woke up and there he was, standing in the room, staring at them while getting ready to make his next move. They screamed bloody murder and called the police immediately. Was it him in my room that night? I'm 99% sure it was, but kind of relief I didn't get to find that out. What creeps me out the most about this situation is that what about those nights I completely crashed after one too many drinks? You know how the attitude can affect your alcohol tolerance? And oh man, it really did for me. I'm from the sea level and not a big drinker, but a few times I woke up with zero memories from the night before. So the unsettling question is, was that the first time someone got in my room? Was that the first time someone got in my room? How many more guests at this hotel had this happen to them without even realizing that?
I just googled Frisco hotel owner arrested, and sure enough, the first result was an article about him entering the rooms of the female guest. Looks like a creep.
I know, right? I froze when I first saw the news.
Your boss was a racist, sexist creep who treated you and your fellow students, co-workers, particularly the women. It seems like shit because he knew he could get away with it. That was flat out sexual harassment, which he could have been reported for. The fact that he turned to be an even bigger creep, taking advantage of female guests, just shows what a sick bastard he was, and how he was more of a danger than you knew at the time. That was definitely him who tried to creep in your room that night, which is why he avoided you after that. Thank goodness you were able to get out of there and move on to bigger things. Good to hear he got caught though, because what he was trying to do was despicable.
Whoa, that's such a disturbing and upsetting experience you went through. I can't even imagine how terrifying it must have been to wake up and find someone in your room like that. And the fact that the owner was involved in such creepy behavior with other guests is absolutely appalling. It's really unsettling to think about how many people might have been victims of his actions without even realizing it. Your instincts and your reaction were definitely on point, and it's a relief that you moved on from that place. Kudos to you for standing up for yourself and sharing your story. Stay strong, and I hope life in the States has treated you better since then. It's crazy how some people can abuse their power, especially in hospitality where guests should feel safe and comfortable.
Exactly. And yes, this country has been my home ever since, and I love it with all my heart. I haven't kept up to date with the news over there in a while, but I do really hope that this man got what he deserved and stopped abusing his power. Disgusting behavior to say the least.
I grew up in Frisco. I actually just moved away during COVID because our lease was ending and we were being priced out of the area. I'm curious what hotel this was at. I'm going to Google it and see if I can pull up the article, but feel free to DM me with the answer. Also, I miss the county so much. That place will always be my home. My parents started one of the popular breakfast places in town. It's not bread and salt or the log cabin, but sold it in like 2003 or something. I had a good friend running the front desk at the Best Western, I think. It was the hotel by Safeway. Right before you get to outer range. I'm hoping it wasn't that hotel.
Not the best Western, but close. I live in California now, but occasionally I miss this place a lot too. Despite the creepy experiences I had while living there, I made some great memories too.
I just googled Frisco Hotel owner arrested, and Sure enough, the first result was an article about him entering the rooms of the female guest. Looks like a creep. Stayed strong, and I hope life in the States has treated you better since then. It's crazy how some people can abuse their power, especially in hospitality, where cats should feel safe and comfortable.
The article says that he came into their room with snacks a few minutes after they got back, so they were still awake and hadn't gone to bed yet. Obviously, still inappropriate for him to let himself in, but just thought I'd mention the correct information.
Yeah, it's funny because at first he said he absolutely didn't enter the room, then later changed the story to I was just trying to check on them type of deal. I'm glad those women were all awake still. Number 5. I think I almost got abducted. I'd like to start off by saying that I'm a male, I'm 29 years old, and I'm writing these lines during the very first days of February of the year 2024. I was partying out this Friday night with 4 of my female friends, 2 of which I have just met that evening. We were having drinks at a club in Central Europe. The night was going great. We were dancing and talking. All of us had fun. At around 2 a.m., the girls grabbed a taxi and went home. I have stayed a bit more in the club to finish my drink. I have danced on the stage for about 20 minutes. Then I have grabbed a taxi and went home. When I arrived on the street where I live, my drunk ass realized that I have no keys and I couldn't get home as I live alone. So I called another taxi and went back to the club to look for my keys. First, I went to the bar to ask if anybody has brought any lost keys to them that night. Unfortunately, they didn't have my keys, so I started to look for them in the club in every place I was in that night. I have turned on the flashlight on my phone and I have been looking for the keys in a mass of people. About 10 minutes go by and I haven't found anything apart from broken glass and cigarette butts. I went back to the place where I was initially looking for them. This is the place where we had been having our drinks with the girls. I have started to look for my keys on the sitting benches instead of on the ground. I had my keys in the inside pocket of my jacket, as I always do, and my jacket was placed in the corner of that bench the whole night just before I left. People were sitting on the benches, and they've had their jackets on the benches too. I sat down near the corner where I was sitting before, and besides me was a guy with lines of some drugs on his phone, freely giving them to other people. He had put his jacket in the corner of the bench, and I wanted to look at the corner of the bench to see if my keys hadn't been pushed into the corner or something. So I grabbed his jacket, and to my surprise, my keys were right under his jacket, in the middle of the bench. I was so happy to find my keys. I was drunk and started pretty much yelling how happy I am to find my keys, as I was getting fucking desperate in that moment. There was a guy on that bench that we have met with the girls before the club. I will call him L. He was really nice during the whole night, and so I keep talking to L when I found my keys. I've even gone to the bar and grabbed another beer just to talk for a bit more with L. I went to the toilet to have a pee, and when I came back, L had found himself an acquaintance to which he was talking. So I just started to finish my beer while I smoked a cigarette and was getting ready to go home. This is when the guy that had lines of some drugs on his phone has started talking to me. I will call him Pedro, as it was definitely a fake name that he gave me. I've been talking with him in English. Pedro was 19 years old and he was from Colombia. He told me stories about how life is in Colombia and how his family struggles. He told me that his father has died recently and he's the oldest son. So he's in Slovakia trying to make some money for the family. He even showed me photos of him and his family back in Colombia. I sympathized with Pedro, and I was feeling sorry for him. After 20 minutes, El has scored with a girl that he met, and he said that they are going home. He asked Pedro if he has any MDMA on him, and he sold some to them. So El left with the girl. By the way, that's ecstasy. People around the bench have seen that happening, and so they wanted some drugs from Pedro. So he started to make lines on his phone again. I told Pedro that I'm going home and wished him best luck. I grabbed my jacket and I started walking. This is when Pedro called out to me and stopped me. Said that it's late and that he should go back to the hotel too. He scratched the drugs from his phone onto the table, took his belongings and told the people that they can finish whatever was left for free. Me and Pedro have walked out of the underground club. When we are outside, he asked me if I could walk him to his hotel, which was nearby. A 5-minute walk. He told me in the club that he has no friends and no family in Slovakia. I really sympathize with him. I told him that, sure, I can walk him to the hotel. We were talking the whole walk, and he was saying really nice things to me. Like how I get his situation and how a good person I am. When we arrived at the hotel, the door was closed, and he messaged to someone to come and open the door for him. He asked if I want to have one last beer with him, to which I say sure, but I will be on my way once we finish the beer. Some girl came and opened the door for us. They have spoken in Spanish as they greeted. The hotel itself didn't really look like a public hotel. There was a reception and stairs up, and on the left there was our dining room. Pedro told me to wait for him in the dining room. This was like 5 a.m. already. I went to the dining room, and there was a girl sitting with her laptop. I greeted her with "Hola" and sat down. Pedro came after maybe 3 to 5 minutes with 2 open cans of some beverage. There was a parrot and a Jack Daniels logo. The can was in gold color, I think. This is the moment that I should get suspicious and not drink from an open can. My naive and drunk ass overlooked this fact, and I have drunk from the can. I was talking with Pedro about all the drug cartels in Colombia and how is their politics fucked up. After about 10 minutes, I started to feel weird and look at my phone. My hands and eyes were tingling. I was quickly aware of what was happening now. I turned on the location and mobile data on my phone and put the phone on a direct pocket than I did that night. Pedro started to ask me how I'm feeling, to which my adrenaline levels blown up. I started to think that I'm being abducted by some Colombian human trafficking ring. My sight started to weirdly tingle, and the lights were blinding me. My jaw was fucked up as I was pushing my teeth together. I have taken drugs in the past, and this felt like an stimulant and a dissociative, which was really weird for me to understand. I tried to keep my voice calm and my mind present. I told Pedro that I know what is going on and asked him why he gave me a stimulant if he needs me unconscious. Pedro's hands started to shake and he didn't answer to me. The girl at the laptop has looked right in my eyes. The first time that she even moved with her body. Pedro grabbed his phone and started to write to somebody on WhatsApp. I told Pedro that they did make a mistake in the dose, that I'm fine apart from having been unknowingly drugged. I think that Pedro had drugged me back in the club while I went to the toilet, which is why he quickly got up when I was leaving. Everything I said, Pedro rewrote to somebody else, and he always waited for an incoming message before saying anything to me. I started to talk to the girl too, told her that I don't give a fuck about what they are doing there, but I'm walking out. At one moment, I remember saying that I get what Pedro is doing, but I don't get what the girl's part was in all of this, to which I was pointing my finger at her. Pedro has got a notification on his phone, and he told me that he's sorry and I can go home if I want. I didn't respond to him. Got my drugged ass up, and as I was walking out of the dining room, I stopped by the girl with her laptop, stared right into her eyes, and holded my hand up in a fist bump. She looked in my eyes, gave me a fist bump, and did a weird grimace on her face. I walked to the door at the reception, which were closed. I started to kick and punch the doors while yelling, "Open the fucking door!" The receptionist did, and I walked out. My heart was pumping. My whole body was shaking. I was feeling both dizzy and awake. I ran to a main street, and I was calling my mom to come and get me as fast as possible. But I didn't know where I was. I was feeling dissociated and couldn't really apprehend to what just happened. As I got to a main street where a bus stop was, I started to feel very paranoid. There was a white Mercedes suburban vehicle that stopped right in the main road near the bus stop that I stood on. They turned off the car lights and were just standing there. And I told all of this to my mom, and she told me to look for a camera. So I stood right under a camera which was at the bus stop to make sure that I'm seen. I was feeling and talking weirdly, to which my mom told me to talk to her, to tell her what I can see around me. I have seen a few people that walk to the main street. Everybody was on their phone and occasionally looking at me. One guy came close to the bus stop, and I approached him while I still had my mom on the phone. I asked him, what does he want from me? And he was like, "I'm sorry, do I know you?" To which I said that I'm sorry. After about 10 minutes of me being on the phone with my mom, the white suburban utility vehicle turned on the engine and left off. My mom came by car soon after. I was walking to her car on the road, but I couldn't walk properly. I felt paranoid. Lots of adrenaline going through my body. My heart was pumping so fast, I thought I'm going to have some kind of seizure. I managed to get in my mom's car. She was in her pajamas, so much scared. I started to tell her everything that happened. I told her to drive around our city instead of driving me in case they are following us. We were driving around for maybe an hour, talked about what happened during the night, how the inside of that building looked and all. My jaw was going so crazy that my mom could hear it, and she was really scared for me. The whole ride I was feeling really weird. At one point, I feel like my soul left my body. I can't really describe it. I didn't feel like myself, like I'm not real. Lights were blinding me and my vision was blurred and tingling, like my eyes were going up and down all the time. I didn't feel no rushes of euphoria or anything. I thought that they gave me some mix of drugs. I arrived at home at around 10:30. I'd arrived at my home at around 7:30 a.m. My mom stayed at home with me, comforting me. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. We were talking about going to the police and also about if I am in any kind of danger anymore. At around 11 a.m. I fell asleep. During this time, my mom cleaned my apartment and my sister came to visit me. I don't know what I would do without my family. One of my girlfriends that was with me during that night came to visit me. As I talked to her, I thought that I got some kind of an episode, like schizophrenic or something, like Why the hell would I be a target of something like this? I'm a chubby, bearded guy. Why would they want to abduct me? I'm afraid of going to the police, as our police department and politics are corrupt, and they always work with any kind of mafia for as long as I can remember. They would take my testimony, start to investigate, and then they would be stopped by their officials. I still don't fully believe that what happened to me was an experience with a human trafficking ring. However, there are so many red flags in it that I can't remember. However, there are so many red flags of it in what I can remember. However, there are so many red flags of it in what I can remember. Like, why would be Pedro scared after I called him out? Why would he stop talking to me unless someone sent him a message on his phone? Why would he even start to message somebody during our conversation? Why the fuck would he drug me without me knowing it? But ultimately, why the fuck would they let me go? San Pedro. So, Pedro, the two girls from the weird hotel, and possibly the Colombian human trafficking ring, let's not fucking meet again. And by the way, a little bit of an update. I went to the ER with my mom this early morning, as I woke up with spasms all over my body. They gave me an IV. They gave me an intravenous shot. They gave me an IV intravenous shot and sent a sample of my blood for toxicology report. They did some tests, like an electrocardiogram and blood pressure, and they've sent me home approximately 3 hours ago. The results of the toxicology just came by mail to my mom. There are traces of acetylfentanyl, ethylphenidate, and ketamine in my blood. Also, while I was being given the intravenous, the doctor said to my mom that this is not uncommon and that they've had a lot of patients who have been unknowingly drugged during the last few years. He said that this wasn't this common before.
I'm relieved that you're safe. No further problems happened. You are lucky to have escaped from their jaws. I advise don't trust anyone blindly. What you see outside may not be their intentions inside. Beware of this. Be cautious around people. Maybe they were organ harvesters.
Thank you for your kind words and advice. I will definitely be much more cautious from now on. I always look for the best in people and feel empathy for them. But I will never trust a stranger again after this experience. Also, yeah, they might really be organ harvesters indeed. This might be what they are doing. My mom is thinking the same.
He probably just wanted to get you horny with some drugs he got from his friend. You had an unexpected reaction, so he started frantically texting the dealer. That's why it felt more like a stimulant. The building was probably a hostel for Colombians. The other girls just happened to live there. They probably weren't friends with Pedro and kept to themselves. You most likely had a run-in with some closeted creep that gets dudes high in order to sleep with them. Ever seen the movie Hostel? It's also set in your country.
I've heard about the movie, but I've never seen it. I'll definitely try to find and watch that movie. Number 6. I was someone else's Let's Not Meet. This was years ago, but I still tell this story to friends anytime I get the chance. I was the baddie in someone's Let's Not Meet. Before this story begins, I would like to clarify that I'm writing these lines in the middle of April of the year 2019. For the sake of simplicity, call me Sip. This was years ago. When I was in high school, I entered a relationship with a very close friend named Ivory. After Ivory and I broke up, we stayed good friends. When Ivory's birthday came around, she asked me to come to the birthday party she was having. The first leg of the evening was at a restaurant I'd never been to a few towns over. Afterward, we would all return to a mutual friend's house for beverages and relaxation. One of Ivory's friends had volunteered to drive us all to the restaurant, but I had heard plenty of stories about her terrible driving. As a result, I opted to chauffeur myself in my luxurious minivan. Yes, I drove a minivan in high school. Ivory's friend told me 7 p.m., so at 7 p.m. my black ass rolled into the parking lot. I called Ivory to let her know I had arrived, but they were just leaving. I overheard Ivory tell her friend, "Hey, if you tell Sip of Sunshine 7, he's there at 7. This old man, I had about half an hour of boredom before I had any company. Being the introvert I am, I decided not to go inside and wait like a normal person. Instead, I decided to listen to whatever angsty music I was into at the time, probably Heartbeat by Childish Gambino. Moreover, I also didn't park right near the restaurant. The restaurant was located in a plaza, a strip with several other stores along either side. For some reason, I thought it'd be weird for patrons to see me just sitting there like some waiting weirdo. Instead, I parked at the far end of the plaza by a supermarket. I could still see the restaurant, and there were fewer cars on this side of the parking lot. 5 minutes goes by. I'm rapidly switching through songs. 10 minutes goes by. I'm bored like a piece of pine in a woodshop class. Out of the abyssal silence of boredom, I felt the hum of a text come through. Ivory had texted me. Thank God! A brief reprieve from this boredom. As I'm composing a response, I get this weird feeling. You know that feeling like someone is watching you? Like you can almost hear their eyes? I felt something unnerving, so I look up from the glow of my phone into the darkness before me. What I saw was a family of 4. There was a woman, her husband, and their 2 children. All 4 were looking at me intensely. The woman was standing in front of her 2 children with her hands outstretched, as though to shield them from a proleptic and palpable existential danger. The look in her eyes was of sheer horror, like a waiter had asked her, "Is Pepsi okay?" I have never seen such utter panic so visible on someone's face. I once had to physically intervene to prevent an armed assailant from attacking someone. The woman slowly crept forward, family inching behind her. She began moving towards the driver's side, closer to me with each step, and with each step, her terror rising. At this point, I'm beginning to panic because I have no clue why this woman and her family are snarling at me so aggressively. Did they mistake me for Ajit Pai? Without warning, the husband says something I could not hear through the glass. He extends his arm and points to my left. His wife, children, and I all simultaneously follow his hand. He was pointing 5 posts to the left of my car where an almost identical one sat. The mother threw her head back in a single burst of laughter as she unlocked her car. This family left the grocery store to find a black teen dressed in all black sitting in their car. He then proceeded to maintain eye contact for what felt like an eternity. My perplexed expression likely appeared as a more sinister one, especially in the crepuscular light. I'm just glad they realized where their car was before anyone got hurt or police got called. So, family who thought I was in their car at night, I promise we can totally meet. I'm actually a really nice guy who doesn't steal cars. So, to summarize, too long did not read. TLDR. Family thought I was stealing their car because I was sitting in my car to pass the time. Pretty sure the panic literally shaved years off that woman's life. And I just want to thank everyone for being so encouraging about my writing. You all inspire me to take it seriously as a hobby. I'm sure you'll see me around on some writing subreddits. You lot are truly wonderful.
Oh, that's a good one.
Thanks. I definitely feel for the woman. Her mom instincts kicked in hard. From my perspective, I had no clue what she was scared of. Luckily, I no longer drive a mom car.
Oh, interesting. Well, I do believe that this actually happened. You're a pretty good storyteller. I'd love to read something fictional from you sometime. As funny as this is, it is also scary. What if they had been the type to jump to conclusions? It could have ended very differently. Glad all was well.
Yeah, I agree on it being scary. I'm allergic to bullets, so if they were armed, it would have really ruined my appetite. That said, the fact that she didn't reach for anything is concerning. Reach for that phone, call those guys with the sirens. They love that shit. Also, life pro tip. If you're ever in a situation with a potentially dangerous individual, put your hand in your pocket, even if nothing's there. Then make a fist. Making people think you have a weapon is just as good 90% of the time.
The way you worded this was hilarious. This definitely seems like something I would do. Mistaking my car for someone else's, and then panicking if I see some stranger in my supposed car.
Hey, we have all been there. The good news is that when everyone got there, I had a pretty great story. No judgment, moms work hard. I think they were tired. Thanks by the way, stories are more fun when you have fun telling them.